This is Tom Tolles. You're listening to WithoutYourHead.com. And you're doing it without your head. Think about it. Oh, wait, you can't. You don't have a head. Oh, man, I went too far again.
All right, welcome to Without Your Head, Horror Radio, the station of decapitation. I am Nasty Neil, along with...
Annabelle Lecter.
And that would make me Terrible Troy.
We have Judith O'Day from the original zombie classic, Night of the Living Dead. I know you have a martini right now.
Oh, yeah, I know it's tucked very safely inside me, so I'm doing just great.
I do think it's probably the best to get liquored up before you talk to us.
Well, for years I didn't, but I figured at 67 or whatever I am, it's okay.
Speaking of that, are you surprised that there's so many different generations of fans that know you and enjoy Night of the Living Dead? Because it's not like just one age group.
I'm blown away that there is such longevity with our film. Just thrills me. I don't always understand it, but you know what? I don't question a good thing. I'm very, very grateful.
What would you say would be the youngest fan you've ever run across that knew the movie?
Oh my gosh. In some of the conventions I've gone to, I have met generations of families, the youngest of which I think maybe were in a little push cart, the little push things that mamas use to push their kids around.
Yeah, a little carriage.
A little carriage. And I have oftentimes asked these little miniature humans what it is they like about Night of the Living Dead. And I marvel how intelligent they are. So I've seen quite a few decades or quite a few family members who are supportive of the film. It's really wonderful.
You sure there were kids in the carriage? Maybe they were just grown adults, or you were into a different
midgets tucked away.
Just like a carriage every now and then.
Oh my! Now you're making me question, and I'll be more sarcastic and cynical the next convention I go to. No, they're wonderful families. I think I've really met within one family. I think I've had about 3 generations of supporters of the film, which just absolutely amazes me.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Is this a true
Yes,
story?
it is.
True story. Troy here's my brother. He's 9 years older, and our mom used to take us to the drive-in, and so he would be a teenager. I'd be a little kid. I believe I was 5 or 6 first time I saw the movie, and I'm not a killer or anything. It didn't affect me that way. And the scene where the truck blows up and the zombies are eating everybody, and I believe I was crying, and she told me, "Oh, it's just a barbecue," and then I was like, "Oh, okay."
Well, I think that's pretty close to one of the lines in the movie when the sheriff says somebody was having a cookout here, something to that effect. But when you realize back in 1968 or 70, 71, that kind of thing really wasn't seen very often. So it could scare young ones who were watching. I'm amazed you turned out as sane as you are.
People who know
you
me.
are sane, are you not?
I was going to say people who know me.
That's questionable.
Might not be so surprised. Annabelle, do you have a question?
Yeah, you're talking about kind of the backstory of this film and the time it was made. And it's really striking to me the way it was cast. I mean, you've got a black actor playing this major role at the time, a very strong role. He ends up striking you in the movie. There's a lot of things going on with how the people function together in the movie and how the characters are seen as these really multifaceted individuals. And for what it is, I mean, it is a zombie movie, but there's a lot going on in there. What did you think about that at the time, and how do you feel about that now?
I thought about it at the time, Annabelle, was I really didn't think about it at the time. I didn't make that correlation.
Mm-hmm.
I was very involved in the pure element of being in a feature film. Mm. It was extremely exciting for me to be involved in this medium. I had always wanted to go into film. Mm-hmm. And at that time, up to that time, I had been involved in musical theater on stage and radio and television variety shows, commercial work, voiceover work. But to be in a feature film was a big deal for me.
Yeah.
That's as far as I went in my head. Mm-hmm. I got involved, of course, with each scene I was to do and what they wanted me to do. It wasn't until later on, and I'd say decades later on, that I really started to think more deeply about what this film was, what it did, and where it was at this point in time, and that's 20, 30, 40 years later. Mm. It took me a while to really think about the impact and the things that we covered, whether it was the black issue, mm-hmm. which we really didn't talk about at all in the film. It was just a man against another man, and it mm-hmm. just happened to be white and black. That's, to me, one of the most exciting things that about our film, and one of the things that I think sustains it as much as it has been sustained over the years. We didn't make an issue out of the black and white. It was just survival. It was human survival.
Yeah.
And I love that.
You think that's what makes it part of the reason why it holds up, because you didn't try to go out of your way to make that an issue, and if you did, maybe, years later it would seem a little outdated, and here you did make it an issue, and you could still, draw your own conclusions from it?
Well, that's a very good point, Neil. I think you're right. Because we didn't purposefully make an issue of it, it was what it was. And it touches more people over a greater spectrum of time. It's more human survival than it is, let's talk about race, mm-hmm. in 1968, which, of course, at that time was such a big issue.
Yeah.
This was one of the magic moments in our film that I think helps sustain it.
Yeah, and it all goes so naturally, because I don't think any of the characters ever mention that during the movie.
No one mentions you're a black man. Or, no. You're right.
Now, at the time, was it a risk to make a film like that? With a black man taking this, he was the hero of the movie. Mm.
Absolutely. The better person to answer that question deeply for you would be George Romero. Were we taking a risk? I don't think, I certainly didn't think of it as a risk. I thought of it as being a very fortunate young actress to have been cast mm-hmm. in a feature film. What George was thinking at the time, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I do know that there was no question in either his, Carl Hardman's, Jack Russo's, or Russ Striner's minds that Dwayne Jones mm-hmm. gave the best audition.
Yeah.
That's what they were looking for. They were looking for someone they felt who could carry the role. Dwayne could carry it. The fact he was black, really, I don't think was at all the important point in the selection. for which I'm very grateful, because I think it's made a difference in the longevity of film.
Absolutely.
Did you know George Romero before the movie at all?
I had met George a short while before, some years before. I auditioned for a film he was doing, and I didn't make the part, or they didn't make the cut. I really hadn't worked with him to any depth until I got involved in the film.
Working with him, what were your initial thoughts of him as a director?
I loved working with George. I loved his creativity. I loved the fact that he'd go on for days in order to get what it was he wanted. And that fit very well with the kind of person I am and was at the time. I loved watching how he put scenes together. And you know what? If I can make a correlation, and I've never said this before, but I think of Clint Eastwood and how, as an actor, how well he transitioned as a director. Now, I know George wasn't so much an actor, but I think he understood an actor's mind. Mm-hmm. I don't think George ever felt threatened by an actor's thoughts or feelings. He drew upon them, he said what he wanted, and he gave you the freedom to give him what he wanted in the best way that you felt you could do. And I know that making that correlation between him and Clint Eastwood might be unusual, but it was very easy working with George, even with his intensity. It was great, absolutely great.
Yeah, it sounds like a real pleasure for an actor to work with this guy. Almost like you're being spoiled, though, if you're fresh in your career and you work with him and it's so wonderful, then I wonder what it's like to move on from there.
Oh, I'm sure you have a lot of different approaches with all kinds of directors. Mm-hmm. But to have that freedom, when George said, "This is what I'm going for in the scene. Mm-hmm. These are the major things I'd like you to achieve within the 30 seconds or minute, whatever we had in the scene." And then he lets you do it. Mm-hmm. That was exciting. Yeah. Very, very exciting. And also, I have to laugh at this, but remember, this was not a high-budget film. We didn't have a lot of film stock to waste. Oh. You know, we weren't shooting digitally. We were shooting film stock. So he'd tell you what he wanted. He'd hope that you would achieve it. Because you couldn't do 150 takes. Yeah. It just didn't happen. We were lucky if we ever got more than 2 takes. Wow. For a scene.
Mm. That's amazing that what came out of that is so, it's so brilliant for so many people. It's just such an excellent movie, and to know that you perform so well under pressure, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was a magic combination of time, people, and talent.
Mm. Well, when did you realize that the movie was a big deal? Was it right away, or did it take time?
Oh, no. It wasn't until decades later, Neil, that I had any inkling that the film was as powerfully accepted and considered a growing classic. First of all, the reason for that is that I was out west. Everybody else was back east. They got very much involved in a lot of the horror conventions going on. They were much more aware of how important the film was becoming to a great many people. Out west, doing my life and my musicals and whatever it was I was doing out west, didn't have that connection. And it wasn't until I shared a convention or two with some of my old buds from the film that I realized, my gosh, people really care about our film. It was amazing to me.
I've been to many conventions, with a lot of the cast members, and I believe I owe Russ several quarters for saying the line many times. How often have you heard they're coming to get your barber?
How often do I hear they're coming to get you?
Yeah.
I just answered that question for a convention I'm going to be attending in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And my answer to that was gazillion. And you know what? I never tire of hearing it. And I know you may question my honesty there, but it's true. I really don't tire of hearing it.
Yeah. I don't think Russell does either, because he's getting a quarter every time you say it.
Oh, boy, that would be nice. I'd like to get a quarter every time I hear it, but that doesn't really matter.
Yeah. I've talked to Lon John Russo and George Costanza, and they love talking about the movie, but there's always a little bitterness or something there because you don't have the rights to the movie, and so many people have taken it and done their own thing with it. What are your thoughts on that when you see someone taking the movie and adding their own things to it, or selling something with the movie on it, and you're not getting anything out of it?
These things happen. Unfortunately, whoever didn't put the copyright on the film when it was re-released, it's a shame. But these things happen. I don't hold any grudges for it. I don't want to try to take advantage of it now and make as much money as I can make out of it. To be honest with you, that's not as important to me. Mm-hmm. What's really important is the amazing fact that the film still carries weight in the viewing public. Mm-hmm. That's pretty exciting to me. And not a lot of films, and there are gazillions of films made every year, not a lot of films can boast that kind of popularity over time. Mm-hmm. So I don't hold any resentments for it. Mm-hmm. I really don't, and I'm glad because it's a much more freeing way to live.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like you're just so grateful for the kind of human connection it's made. You talk about these really great experiences you have at conventions, and you just seem so pleased by that you just strike me as the kind of person that the financial stuff, yes, it would be nice, but these other things are so much more valuable than that.
Very, very true, Annabelle. I think some of the greatest times I've had are talking to people about little moments in the film that meant something to them, and they'll say, well, what did it mean to you, and how are you feeling then? Mm-hmm. And I know it's just a little horror film among many great films in this world, but I get such a kick out of talking seriously to people who care about the film. That's why conventions are a really great high in my life at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any particular memories, either maybe something a fan gave you at a convention, or just some type of interaction with a fan that stands out to you?
Absolutely. I can remember the last one of the last conventions, was it Seattle? I received a copy of a portrait that a fan had made of Barbara. And it brought me to tears. It was so amazing that this individual took the time to bring into that portrait all that feeling and what feelings evoked in him. I have it hanging up in my office. These are things that continually happen to me when I go to these conventions. I don't go to as many as Russ and George and Jack, a lot of the other people who are still alive, but the ones I go to really knock me out.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people here in the chat room asking about what are your thoughts about the Save the Evans City Cemetery Chapel movement?
Oh, Gary was our sound guy on the film. He's brother of Russ Schreiner. I think what Gary is doing is incredible. The effort he has put forth to get the horror people around him in support to make sure that beautiful little stone chapel doesn't fall to rock and ruin. I think that's an incredible thing. It's a tiny thing, but you know what? For Night of the Living Dead, it's a big thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm very grateful for all the effort he has made. And I think I feel that way if I can share with you a little story. In one of the re-releases of the film, I think it was the one with George Romero. Oh gosh, it was a black and white or a red and white cover. I loved it. But on it was a bunch of interviews that we did coming back after all those years. One of them was done in the cemetery. When I went back to that cemetery, I hadn't been back since we filmed in it. It was surreal. I thought if somebody wiggled the atmosphere just a little bit, I'd be back in 1967. And we'd be doing this all over again. Mm-hmm. It was magic. It was surreal. So I say, God bless Gary and all the effort he is willing to make, and the fact that so many people are supporting him is really a gift to the movie.
Yeah, at the last convention we were at, it was there was a big movement there at it, and I guess they're going forward with it, so that's good news.
Mm.
They sure are, and I think construction is underway. I'm not sure when everything will be completed, but they have certainly they've raised enough money to be able to sustain that chapel, and I think that's wonderful.
What were your thoughts on the Barbara and the 1990 remake?
You know what? They are two distinctly different films from different times. When I made the film, women behaved a bit differently. Although I think my portrayal of Barbara was really sort of honest from my heart. Every person, whether he's male or female, will react to some kind of devastation, whether it's a zombie attack or whether it's something more realistic like an airplane crash or something to that nature. We'll all behave differently. Mm. Barbara, in 1968, I felt behaved very honestly. Mm-hmm. She had to understand what this was. She went into herself You could say she was a catatonic fool and didn't do anything. But you know what? Sometimes we have to do that. But at the very end, she came to the surface again, and she fought like hell to save Helen Cooper. In the remake in the early 90s, women at that time were really pushing the envelope as far as what they could do and how strong they were. So seeing Barbara in fatigues with an Uzi was far more appropriate in 1990 or 92 than it would have ever been in 1968. Mm-hmm. Consequently, in answer to your question, each one I consider a separate entity unto itself.
Mm-hmm. Did you keep any of the props from the movie?
Oh, for the longest time I did. I had my fall, I had my dress, and my raincoat. But as I moved around in Southern California, those things sort of passed by the wayside. And again, because I was so far away from people who were still involved with the growing acclaim of the film, I didn't realize that hanging on to those things might be pretty important. Mm-hmm. So I lost them along the way.
Yeah. Have any of them resurfaced? Maybe when you're at a convention, you might find somebody who you gave something to, Pat in the past, and here they still have it, and then brought it and showed it to you?
No, not so far, but it would be interesting if that ever happened. I'd love to see it.
Yeah. Are you surprised that zombies are, so mainstream now?
I try to get my handle around it, or my hands around it. I may not always understand it, but I will tell you an interesting little side story. About a year ago, when, oh gosh, Mother, what's the name of the TV series that...
The Walking
Dead. Walking Dead. The Walking Dead. I was told by a son of a friend of mine, haven't you been watching The Walking Dead? This is incredible. It's all about zombies. And I said, gosh, no, I hadn't seen it. I started watching. He said, well, I've TiVo'd about 4 or 5 of them. You certainly don't have to watch them if you don't want to. But I started watching, and I couldn't stop. I was amazed at what they have done in filmmaking now and in storytelling with the zombie scene. I was hooked. I watched at least 5 shows in a row, and I just hope it never really happened. Let me put it that way. I sure hope it never really happened.
Yeah. It's weird because on this show for years, I was a big fan of the comic book, and I kept saying on the show, the comic would make a great TV series because it's almost, the comic book was almost like reading George Romero zombie movie in comic book format. And it's gone on for a long time, so when it finally happened to come on the TV, I was really happy about that.
Well, then you really guessed it, because it certainly has been a popular series.
Troy, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just curious, what was the crowd reaction like back in 68? I mean, were people supportive at the time, or were they more like, oh yeah, this is okay, and just kind of moved along?
I think we had a variety of reactions, some of which were, how could you let your daughter perform in something that was so violent? That was one reaction that my family got. Another reaction, of course, was, oh, isn't this fun? Let's go to the movies, let's watch the zombies. And then, as the movie progressed, when it appeared to be so real, poor kids were scared out of their pants. So they really were frightened at something that they had never seen before on the screen. We had a variety of reactions. Today, because movies are so violent, so over the top with computer effects, that you wonder how anybody could really care. But back then, people did care. It touched their sense of terror and reality in a way that horror film had not touched them before.
Kind of along those lines here in the chat room, Chi-Town Matthew, who wants to know, how did your social life, how was it affected by the movie role, either positively or negatively?
Interesting question. Being in Night of the Living Dead has changed my life. I went on to continue in the musical field for a long time. I worked with a variety of directors. I also began my own company teaching people how to stand up and present themselves. When they found out in those various classes that I taught over the years in major corporations, when they found out that this is the Judith O'Day who was in Night of the Living Dead, the whole tenor of the class changed. I was amazed. I would watch it happen. And yes, it was very helpful because people cared about the film. It had affected their own lives. And to actually meet somebody who was so integrally involved in it was very special to many people. So indeed, being in that film has had a profound effect on my life. A wonderful effect.
Annabelle, do you have a question?
Yeah, you were just mentioning some of the changes that have happened in your life since then. So you ended up moving away more from mainstream movie acting and more into theater sorts of things. Why did you make that decision? Was that something you decided to do on your own because it just felt better for you, or was it something that just kind of happened?
Oh, absolutely not. I would have loved to have continued. And yes, I have made a few films since then. If you're aware of November Sun, October Moon, Serial Slayer, what else have I done? Women's Studies. I've done some fun things for young, independent filmmakers. In fact, I have one that should be coming out the beginning of next year. It's a Jason Cullum film. It's called Face Inside. And another one after that, it's called Ed Dean DDS. But so I fortunately was able to continue in the film industry, but it was very much confined to the horror genre. I think I would have loved to have stretched out into more mainstream films. But since that didn't happen to me, although I did do The Pirate with Ann Archer, Franco Nero, Eli Wallach, I loved the involvement in performance that I was able to have over the years in live theater, whether it was a comedy or a tragedy or a musical. It was still creative. It was still theater. So I've been very fortunate to have done, had my foot into a lot of areas of creativity.
That's excellent.
Jade here in the chat room, she wants to know, what's your role in the new Night of the Living Dead film, Genesis?
Well, you know what? We haven't signed a contract yet. I know that Matt Cloud would like to see that happen, and I think I would like to see it happen, to be honest with you. One of the major concerns is this really legal? Are they able to go ahead and make a film that is so closely related to the original? And with all the legal analysis that Matt Cloud has done, it looks as if it's okay for him to go ahead. Now, I don't think that Russ Streiner or Jack Russo or possibly George Romero would quite agree with that. But at the moment, Matt is going ahead with his film, feeling that he is legally able to do that. And I also know that Matt is going out of his way to offer a deal for the originators of the film so that they can share in whatever financial benefit there might be. And I don't know if that's going to happen, but you know what? I hope it does. I just hope it does, so that more people can become familiar with our story and other stories that are out there that are really interesting. I think Matt Cloud has an interesting concept to his story, and I hope I can be a part of it.
Let's see. Let's try this again. We got a 304 area code. Who are you?
Hated FX.
What was that?
Hated FX from Make One, West Virginia. Just kind of listening in.
Oh, do you have a question? Or you just
she just answered it, believe it or not.
Really? I think that's a
Hi there from Virginia.
Yeah.
I remember...
Hi, Judith.
Hi, West Virginia. I did children's theater in West Virginia. I loved it.
It's amazing. I'm affiliated with a couple of organizations doing theater around here.
Great.
I'm a big fan of yours.
Oh, bless you for that.
I do have one question about the filming itself. How was Ben to work with?
How was Ben to work with Dwayne Jones?
Yes.
It was wonderful. If I can choose very important descriptive words to describe them for you to understand, they would be intellect, focus, and seriousness. Dwayne Jones took his role as Ben very seriously. It wasn't Shakespeare. It was a horror film, but you couldn't tell the difference. He took them both that seriously. He was a dedicated actor. And working with him was really exciting. He was far more serious. I sort of had an edge to me, a little sense of humor, and I was younger than he. So, we had different personalities. But once George said action, we pulled it together, and we had a great time. I was very grateful for the opportunity to work with him.
That's amazing.
Thanks for calling in, man. Let's see, Will Bozarth on the Facebook, he wants to know how much of a pain was it to work with the wig?
It really wasn't a pain at all. I think we had more bobby pins in that thing than they sell in Target. There wasn't a problem, at least for me. In fact, once we started shooting, I forgot about those things. If I had to run fast or if I fell down either on purpose or by accident, whatever happened to the wig happened to the wig. I didn't worry about it.
I have a question. I've noticed that you and a few of our guests have really excellent voices. Did you get professional training as an actress, or is it something you've just developed through your craft over time?
I think it's the second of those. It's just something that has developed over time. And I appreciate your making that comment. That's very nice of you.
Oh, absolutely.
Definitely is good. I'm jealous.
Well, I sure want to thank you, all three of you, for inviting me on. I've so enjoyed talking with you all, and I love being able to talk to the people who call in.
Mm-hmm. Well, we really appreciate coming on.
Yeah, it's been a great time.
Yeah, I believe I asked you about 3 or 4 years ago, and then we finally got you on.
You got me. Here we are. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You're very kind.
Just one last question, because I saw you mention this somewhere. I think it might have been on YouTube or something. Night of the Living Bread was apparently just overall, when you see like zombies used, as parody, like what goes through your mind?
You know what? I think that's quite an honor when somebody is willing to parody something you've done. The Night of the Living Bread, I thought was hysterical, and I really felt quite honored that they would consider us important enough to parody.
I'm gonna search that one out now. Night of the Living Bread.